What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back to discuss the Detroit Lions. And today, we are talking a little bit about the Detroit Lions OTAs. Organized team activities have begun for the Detroit Lions. Actually, they started on Tuesday. Today was the final day of kind of the first session of voluntary OTAs for the Detroit Lions. And we have some updates in terms of injury updates, but also how some of these players looked on the field. So let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to my video. Glad you guys are here, and we're back to talk a little bit about the Lions off season. Man, football is here. Like, seriously, we're in the OTAs, organized team activities. We're almost into June. Soon we'll be talking about preseason in August. I mean, it's really not that far out. The beginning of August, we're talking about the preseason. Plus, then we have the premiere of Hard Knocks. So it's really not that far out. And today, we got a lot of notes from Detroit Lions OTAs today, as well as some injury updates from Dan Campbell's, some notes from press conferences. I think we got a lot of good information today. So I want to dive into a few things that were discussed. This is really like the first look at the Detroit Lions right now. Like I said, this is the third day technically of practice, but it's the first look as it was the first day that was open to the media. So we've been given some information online about what went down at Detroit Lions OTAs today. And it's kind of just our first peek at everything. Now, we do know that these are organized team activities and you're not wearing pads. You got to keep that in mind. So don't, take these practice notes super seriously. However, it is kind of our first look, our first impressions in a way of these players. Now, I'm getting this from a different source. I was not there, so I have to make that clear. These are not my notes. All right, I have to make that clear. And at this time, you are now able to rep 11 on 11. So just keep that in mind, right? There's not really much contact. You're not wearing pads, but they are still working some team drills, 11 on 11s. They're not out there for a very long time, as Dan Campbell said, but it is a little bit of an opportunity to get a little work on implementing the scheme a little bit, because especially for the news players, but the Lions are turning over some things offensively and defensively this year. So you're implementing the new scheme and you're getting the first look at a lot of these players, especially the new additions to your team that are on the roster. So we're going to dive into this. We're going to talk about what we know so far about the Detroit Lions through today's organized team activities. These will resume on June 1st. Is that right? I think June 1st this resumes, and we're back in and we'll have more notes from that as well. So first, let's start with the injury updates. This is what Dan Campbell hit us with. There's also been some articles put out there. Shout out to Pride of Detroit. They gave us some information as well on players that were active, players that were participating in practice, and players that weren't participating. Now, it is important also to throw out that these are voluntary, so the players don't have to go. But as Dan Campbell said, there was a very good turnout. Most of the players were there. Around the league, some guys don't go. I like to hear when the players go, but some veterans like, okay, it's fine. I think the quarterback position is always a little bit different, but aside from that, you can understand when sometimes veterans aren't there. So let's start with the big name, and there's been photos of this player at practice, so that's like super exciting. Like, oh snap, he's going through drills. That's Jeff Okudah, and according to Dan Campbell with Jeff Okudah, he has been pretty limited. I guess he was out there at the beginning of practice going through 11 on 11s, but it's also been noted, according to Dan Campbell, that he has been basically just going through individual drills at this time. Now he's recovering from his Achilles. He's kind of kept us up to date with the videos that he's been posting on social media, but the fact that he's back there in any fashion right now, and it's May, makes you feel really good about the beginning of the season for Jeff Okudah. Just going through individual drills, I think that's a really good spot to be at already in May for the chances to be out there for the start of the season. So I think that's a great update to start with. Romeo Okudah, Dan Campbell said he was progressing. According to Pride of Detroit, he was not out there at practice. So I guess we don't have tons of updates there on Romeo Okudah. We'll just kind of see where he's at as time continues to go on and we get more information. With Jerry Jacobs, according to Dan Campbell, he is doing very well. He's been very involved in team drills. Sometimes he's mimicking things a little bit behind some of the other players, but he seems like he's pretty close. He's recovering from an ACL injury that took place at about the little bit past the halfway point last season. That was a very unfortunate injury to lose Jerry Jacobs, and that's kind of one that you sort of forget about a little bit because of when it happened. You kind of forget that injury took place, but we definitely want to have Jerry Jacobs back this season. He was outstanding last year. I want to see him build on last year. Jameson Williams, no really update there. He was spotted at practice, but he's been there at practice. Like we said, he was trying to get work on the jugs machine, but they're not putting a timeline on it, but they're also kind of taking it slow. He said it's basically the same answer that he would have given us a week ago on where Jameson Williams is. So really no update there with Jameson Williams. We'll just kind of have to stay tuned. We'll see how long it takes before he's back. Some people think it'll be during the season. The doctor that worked on his ACL believes that he'll be able to be back as fast as the team basically wants to allow him to come back. So we'll just have to keep our eyes on that one. Taylor Decker, he was spotted at practice. He's out there. He's just really taking it slow right now. And this was an injury that he actually had in the last game of the season against the Green Bay Packers. Kind of forget about this too. We had injuries all over the place in that last game against the Packers. I mean, our offensive line at one point was like, what is happening here? We're on our third string center. Literally it became Jonah Jackson during our offensive line was completely depleted at one point in that game, but we still won it. So I'll take it. I don't care. We still won. But Taylor Decker is still recovering from that foot injury. It's in a similar area for Taylor Decker, and he said it's just something that's kind of a carryover from the injury that he had, and right now he's just trying to be smart with it. That way it's not something that continues to linger, on as we go further. According to Dan Campbell, he said, look, if he needed to play today, he could play today, but they want to be smart about it so it's not something that lingers around. TJ Hutchinson was not noted at practice, but we did get to see a clip of him on Twitter catching a pass from Jared Goff on the sideline. It was a really nice grab, but apparently he wasn't seen today at practice, so that's interesting. But Dan Campbell didn't bring him up. Michael Brockers, again, is voluntary, so he's probably not there just for that reason. Romeo Quora, like we said, he's recovering from his injury. Don't know about Eric Banks and also John Pennicini. Both of those players are listed. Don't really have an update on those two guys. And according to private Detroit players that were pretty limited, didn't really do much at practice, include Jameson Williams, James Mitchell. We know he's also recovering from an ACL injury that happened at the beginning of the season in college. It seems like he'll probably be back faster than Jameson Williams. Derek Deese Jr., the tight end out of San Jose State. Taylor Decker, as we just mentioned. Chase Lucas as well. It was noted that he was jogging around. And as we said, Jerry Jacobs. So that's kind of the injury update, the injury report, if you will, for the Detroit Lions from organized team activities. I mean, the short-term stuff, I wouldn't worry about it too much. The Lions are just going to play it safe, but more about the long-term injuries, and we'll just have to keep an eye on how those progress and where we're at as we get closer to training camp and then preseason. Before we get into some of these practice notes and some of the presser notes, first off, some of the players that have been playing maybe at different positions than what we saw last season. First note is Will Harris, who apparently was taking all of his reps at the cornerback position, but according to Will Harris, still learning the playbook, learning the nickel spot, the outside cornerback position, and the safety position. So he's still involved in learning all that. He's just taking his reps right now as an outside corner. Now, as we said, the Lions don't really have Okudah. They haven't had him much. They had him at the beginning for individual drills, but he's been limited. And you also don't have Jerry Jacobs. So the outside cornerback position right now in terms of health is a little bit limited. So that's why he was out there with Amani Oruwariye. Very curious to see what they do with Will Harris this upcoming season. I think the safety depth is always a possibility, but he's played that position. However, if you're going to utilize him more at cornerback, and you kind of had the sense that maybe the Lions would just view him as a cornerback with possible safety movement ability, but more as just an outside cornerback, you kind of had that feeling. I think it makes sense to give him as many reps possible at the cornerback position, because if you start playing him at safety, then you're like, well, we want the versatility at cornerback. You're probably not going to have it. I mean, last year, it was nice that he was able to go in there and help us out. He definitely needs a lot of work to be getting more reps at the cornerback position. So I would think you get all the snaps at the cornerback position right now if you're Will Harris. We'll see how the Lions look to utilize him unless they want him to be a safety, but there's also the fact that you're missing a couple players as well. The big note that has come out of this comes with Ifeatu Melifonwu. Didn't see him play in tons of games. He had a very long injury that took place against Green Bay in week number 2 that lasted for most of the season. He returns. He plays well against Devontae Adams to end year, so we didn't really get to see him, the big outside cornerback. And apparently he's been taking some snaps not only at cornerback, but also at safety as well, and he has been doing that. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that I think the Lions are going to make him a safety. I thought he showed a lot of growth and a lot of progression from the cornerback position. It also is important to mention that we are kind of deep at cornerback. When you look at Chase Lucas, who I like, I think he'll make the team, our 7th round pick. Mike Hughes, who made a pretty big play in practice today, which we'll talk about, signed to a 1-year deal. They really like this guy, former 1st round pick. Then you also look at the guys like Amani, Jeff Okudah, Jerry Jacobs, AJ Parker. We are very deep at the cornerback position. So maybe that's part of it, but I also think, again, with where we're at, it's some cross-training as well to learn the safety position, because I think Rad made a really good point when we were talking about this, is that if you go a little bit lighter, say, at safety, on paper, right? If you listed Will Harris as a cornerback, and on paper you went lighter at safety in terms of the depth that you keep, whether that's the Brady Breeze, those kind of guys. Maybe you only keep 3 or 4 listed on your depth chart. Having a guy like Iffy that can slide to the safety position if you needed it to it'd be nice to give him some reps there now because he's always played cornerback. He played it last year. Get him reps there now to possibly cross-train him a little bit. We've seen the Lions do that with their defensive backs. Think about Kirby Joseph, right? Kirby Joseph, Lions are giving him some slot reps, and he even said, I'd be open to playing outside corner. I just don't want to have to come off the field. And the thing is, like I said, cornerback seems kind of deep. If Okudah comes in as a starter, if Amani comes in as a starter, if AJ Parker starts at slot, which apparently he did today, flexibility would be nice for Iffy. So I can't say that I know this is going to make him, a long-term safety or that's what he's going to be. We knew coming out maybe there's some flexibility there because he has the feet. He can play man-off coverage. He can definitely match up with tight ends, which is one of the benefits where nickel sets, you could possibly bump him down, match him up against the tight end. I thought when we drafted him, you could be a little bit creative with how you use Iffy because he could match up on certain players that a lot of teams you come in, you're like, well, they don't have a guy for that. The safety can't play him. The linebacker can't play him. Well, we have a guy named Iffy Melifonwu who's 6'3" and he's fast. All right, now that guy can line up with your guy. That's where I think the Lions could get creative with him. So giving him reps there now, I thought the Lions might do this last season, but unfortunately with all the injuries, things just did not go as planned. We also didn't have Quentin Dunbar, which I thought we would last year. With everything that went on last year, didn't really have that option, plus he missed most of the season. However, this season, possibly get some cross-training there. I think it should be very valuable for possibly flexibility going down the road. But again, I don't think that means he's necessarily the safety because I think the Lions have three nice safeties in Tracy, Deshaun Elliott, and Kirby Joseph. But at the same time, the cross-training never hurts. Plus, if Will Harris does become more of a full-time corner, which I think could make sense, I think it actually would make sense because I know at points last year, we were missing some safety depth. It was like, oh, Will Harris will probably just kick back there. They're like, no, we're going to keep him at outside corner. It's like, okay, they must like that idea for him. So if he does make the roster and he is going to be an outside corner, your depth behind those three safeties, you're kind of trying to figure out who it is. I like CJ Moore. CJ Moore brings great value on special teams as well. But maybe this is competition for that because Kirby Joseph can play on special teams very well. Brett Holmes made note of when he came out was his ability to play off-man coverage at his size, and he makes so many plays at the catch point. Obviously, he has the ability to turn and run. He has pretty good quickness for his height, and he's got good long speed, but his ability to come down and tackle, but also play that off-man coverage could give you some value in terms of the abilities that it would take to move to that position. And if you're going to even try it this season, now would be the time to probably start giving him some reps there. Now would be the time to say, okay, let's see what he looks like at least. Let's just get a sense for what he looks like. So I'm not counting out the fact that he couldn't play safety somewhat this year, but at the same time, I'm going to have to go back and watch some of that college stuff. If he said that he takes pride in the fact that coaches feel like they can take him and, utilize him as a matchup, and he said, AG, the plan was, just kind of have me try it because he hasn't done it before. He hasn't played the safety spot before. He said it was definitely a different perspective because now you're seeing the entire field. Brought up, just having that versatility where in case something happens, in case they need him. At least that's maybe what he thinks it is right now. The fact that he's gotten those safety reps is that he knows what everybody's doing because the safety knows what everybody is doing. Versus playing corner, you might know with the DN, your side linebacker, your side safety, where the help is, things like that. But now he gets to see the entire field. So it's kind of giving a sense of everything. And I can see how that would help, especially if you got a certain call, you're repping it at safety, and then you get at corner and you get that same call, and you kind of have the feels like, oh yeah, I remember this guy is doing that. So I guess in the off situation, you may need to know where that guy's at, right? You just having a feel of where everybody's at on the field could make you much quicker to respond to things. So that's something to point out. Also, with Julian Okwara, Dan Campbell said he views him as a Sam linebacker on their base sets, and then his sub downs, basically a defensive end that bumps and kicks inside. Hearing this, I loved it because I also believe this is the role that they view for a guy maybe like James Houston with his ability to rush the passer. We did a James Houston video, and in that video at the end, I know we talked about his role. We talked about, yeah, he's more of an off ball. I don't think he has the ability to play like a pure defensive end, put his hand in dirt. But because of how well he rushes on base downs, if you allow your Sam to walk up on the line of scrimmage and get up on the line, that could suit him really well because he could bump tight ends off the line, possibly move with them, but also rush the quarterback. That could be a good spot for him. Julian has played defensive end going back to Notre Dame, but at his build is probably not ideal, especially on the strong side. If he's lined up at defensive end, you probably want him on the weak side. And on pass downs, that's fine for him, but on early downs, don't know if that's ideal.
Got all the tools for walk-up Sam. Don't forget about some of these athletic coverage plays that he makes. We know he can drop, and then also it helps him at the point of attack against the run. Look at that.
Right? You'd rather have a guy like Hutchinson lined up out there. I mean, that would probably be what you'd rather have. So for a guy like Julian Okwara, I love the fact that Dan Campbell views it like that, and that's how he views this defense, and that's how he views the fit in within this defense. Davis could also compete for a role within this spot as well, but I think that's another place where James Houston gives you some competition. Let's talk about this scheme a little bit because we've heard them talk about wanting to be more upfield, wanting to be more, getting into the backfield approach. And as Dan Campbell said, we're not going to be shooting gaps, closing our eyes. guys. That's not how we're going to do it. We're going to be more aggressive attacking blockers, but we want to be playing more in their backfield than we were last season. He said, I don't want to say we were catching guys last season, but we want to be more in their backfield next year. A little bit more aggressive with what the Lions have on their roster. We talked about this in a stream with Rad, so you could definitely go check that out. But we talked about this. Levi and Aleem, those two guys, when they came out of the draft, that is where they thrived. Levi thrived with the burst off the line, the ability to, shoot gaps, obviously, not blind, but to get downhill. Same thing with Aleem. Aleem played nose a lot in college. Aleem also last season showed that he could be a little bit more reactionary on the defensive line because the Lions were changing it up a little bit last year. They tried to be a little bit more aggressive in the second half of the season. But if you remember, they came into the year, as Dan Campbell put it, they were running almost like a Pittsburgh Okie kind of front, right? And that's not Dan Campbell. That's not where he comes from. That's not a Saints thing. Aaron Glenn didn't run that. Like a 3-4 Okie front. That's basically what that is. And we did kind of run that to begin the year, which makes sense. We praised the Lions coaching staff. We praised Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, because, hey, you took the talent that you had and you try to put him in the best position to be successful, which in that case, because you had Trey Flowers, because you had Romeo, and you just drafted Levi and Aleem, you want to have these guys on the field. You can't run a 4-3 defense. You ran 3-4 to make sure you try to get the best out of all of these guys, but also because linebacker was a little bit, didn't have as much depth, so it made sense for what you were trying to do schematically. But this year, now that you no longer have Trey Flowers, after seeing Romeo Okudah, but now being able to play to Aleem's strength, which last season he showed us he could kind of do it all, but you do notice, and I did a film report on this guy, his ability to get downhill is really where he stands out. Very agile, great athlete. That guy stands out there. And even Michael Brockers to me is much better in that system. And he can hold up a little bit better. He's long. He's powerful. He's a vet. He can hold up a little bit better than some of the other guys did last season. And I know he's not a good pass rusher. He's not a great pass rusher. He never has been much of a pass rusher, which is why we draft Josh Pascal. Definitely go check out that video if you have not, because he will be the guy out there on third downs. And Brockers will benefit from this. They now can naturally progress to a different style this season that I believe fits their strengths. Last year, it made sense why they did what they did. It does. But for Levi and Aleem, not really what they came out as, hey, this is their strengths. Like Aaron Glenn said, at the Senior Bowl, we saw Levi, his ability to get downhill, Aleem McNeil. That wasn't really their strengths, however, coming out of college. That's not what separated themselves. And as Aaron Glenn said, that's what he wants to put on showcase. He wants to showcase their strengths. He wants to showcase Josh Pascal's strengths, Aiden Hutchinson's ability to move inside, kick inside on pass downs and get after the quarterback. He wants to showcase that. And I think it also is something that Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell are coming from. Plus, think Todd Wash. This is a Todd Wash thing. Todd Wash has come from a very long line of playing 4-down linemen, specifically with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And he was always about one-gapping, getting downhill, right? He was never about two-gapping, always about being a one-gapping defensive front. And Glenn said when he told him that this is the kind of thing he wanted to go to, he's like, man, he was so happy Todd Wash. He said, I thought he was going to kiss me. He was that happy. And Todd Wash, this is not only, again, something that coaches are familiar with, and Todd Wash, he's all about this kind of style. Like I said, when they drafted Josh Allen out of Kentucky, they're like, hey, you go into a little bit more of a 3-4, is he going to drop into coverage? He's like, look, this is a 10-sack guy. He better not be dropping into coverage. And no, we're going to be playing a 4-down defensive lineman. We're going to be playing 4-down defensive linemen. So this is also kind of his thing. He has done and mixed it up a little bit in the past. Seen guys drop in his scheme going back to Seattle, but this also fits them as well. I think it does fit our talent that we have, and it should make those guys more comfortable. And they talked about it even going back. They're like, hey, we want to get Levi in a 3-tech. We want to allow him to play downhill, play more aggressive. That will bring out the best in Levi, and I think it makes sense. And you're continuing to see these new additions. It makes sense for all them too. Makes sense for your linebackers. Makes sense for Josh Pascal. It just makes sense. The only guy that maybe doesn't would be, I don't know, John Pennicini, but you still like to have a backup nose tackle. I mean, that's really it, right? John Pennicini, Jayshon Cornell, but even though Jayshon Cornell is coming from Ohio State 4-3, which I thought he was really good as an interior pass rusher. So I think it just makes sense across the board, and naturally we have progressed to that being the change within this defensive front. Continuing with Aaron Glenn, who had some interviews to be a head coach this offseason, he said that he was still very happy, though, to be back, and he loved the experience, but he says, man, I got one of the best jobs in the world. I work for a great head coach, great ownership, a great president.
Qualified to being a head coach in this league, and I'm happy to have him, and we're lucky to have him. We're fortunate to have him as our defensive coordinator.
He has said the same thing that he said going back to last year. I want to be the best defensive coordinator in Lions history. Man, I hope that's the case. If he's the best defensive coordinator in our history, our defense could be pretty darn good. I mean, I'm just saying. And look, you could say he did a pretty nice job last year with what we had to deal with last year, and this will be a test this year to see how this comes together. But it is good to hear that, and he looks very happy to be back. We love Aaron Glenn. We all like Aaron Glenn. Just the linebacker position, off-ball linebackers, just like we just hit on. First off, we're going to see a lot of 2 off-ball linebackers on the field. All right, you're going to see a lot of sets like that. You'll get your base sets where you have 3, you have the Sam backer, but a lot of times it's going to be a lot of 2 off-ball linebackers. Like we just said with the Sam linebacker position, they're thinking Julian Okwara is that. I think they think James Houston is part of that, even though I think he needs some development to figure that out. Thinking guys like that will play that role. So when you look at the off-ball linebackers, they keep asking why I should be confident. Look, I've been saying it, right? Brad Holmes, the defense that he's been around, the defense that he's built has been built through the defensive line. The linebacker was never something they put this massive priority on, right? They played through their defensive line. Last season, they had a UDFA and a 3rd-round pick starting there, a rookie in Ernest Jones. They've never put this massive value. When they did, they drafted a linebacker at pick 30 in 1st round. He was done in 4 years with them. They have not put massive value on that position. But even with that being said, he seems pretty confident about some of the talent that they got.
And on top of that, every one of those guys that's in there is competitive. They're highly competitive, and I just think, man, when we come out with the finished product and the 2 or 3 that are left standing, or there'll be more than that. But my point is, I think we're going to be excited about those guys.
I mean, he was hyping it up. I was like, okay, Aaron, go for it then. He said this is what we got. So we got Alex Anzalone, who looked his best since his rookie season. Okay, now he's a big Alex Anzalone guy. They had him going back to New Orleans. I like Alex Anzalone a lot, too. I think he's reliable. I think he helps you in coverage. But he's definitely a guy that gives you coverage upside. And we saw last year, he made some plays now, right? He had a tip that led to a pick. He could line up and cover a tight end or a running back one-on-one. He wasn't the best in coverage, but, man, he had his moments. And he wasn't bad. He wasn't bad in coverage at all. Now, run defense, it was a little bit rough. But, again, the defensive line was not in the same schematic idea of what they wanted to be. So it didn't help those guys. And secondly, defensive line didn't play that well, partly because of the schematic reasons. Probably they didn't play well. You got to add more talent, which is what they did. Rams in the past have thrived off of, we have such a dominant defensive line, everything off of that will play better. And Brad Holmes has continued to bring that to Detroit. Chris Board from the Ravens, he was a big 3rd down player. So if you talk about the ability to blitz, but also be playing coverage, he's a former safety. I have to go and do another film thing on him because we talked about him when we drafted him, when we signed him, but I want to do more of a film breakdown on him. But I know he played on mainly 3rd downs, split out wide against running backs, and he was a coverage type of linebacker. So you have that as well if you're worried about the coverage side. He says, look, Jared Davis, he's motivated. And Malcolm Rodriguez, he said, I think he's a sleeper. Hold up. I don't think I've ever heard a coach say, I think this guy's a sleeper. That's what we're supposed to say, Aaron Glenn. I can say he's a sleeper, not you. That's just weird. You can't say your player's a sleeper. Malcolm Rodriguez, man, he's been getting a lot of hype, as he should, because Malcolm Rodriguez, he's a stud. In certain schemes, they won't draft him, Malcolm Rodriguez, because he's undersized, because he's under 6 foot, because he has short arms. You won't draft him. Other schemes will be like, that's okay, we need more of the athlete. We need this and that. For linebackers, it really is huge on schematic. Like we said, Patricia would have never drafted a guy at that size. Malcolm Rodriguez is a beast. And if you don't know that, man, you got to go check out my video on it. We broke him down. He is outstanding. So I agree. I think he is a sleeper, Aaron Glenn. Kelvin Shepard said Malcolm Rodriguez was one of the smartest young players that he's been around. But he's not only smart, he puts the work in. And he brought up James Houston. He said he's going to be a pretty good player. He didn't bring up anybody else. He probably just wanted to stop. But Sean Deion Hamilton, I think, is all there. He's right, though. As Dan Campbell said, it's going to be a bloodbath. There is going to be so much competition in this room between the Anthony Pittmans, who apparently, according to Kelvin Shepard, has been putting on a clinic. Told him he had a good pass coverage rep. It forced Timbo to throw the ball away. He and Kelvin Shepard celebrated afterwards. We are just super, super deep at the spot. We're just trying to figure out who's actually going to make the team. Last year, we kept 5 off-ball linebackers. Now you include Julian in that mix. James Houston's going to make it. Malcolm Rodriguez is going to make it. Obviously, Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, who I didn't even bring up. And then you're trying to figure out, was there another off-ball linebacker that makes it in there? I'm not really concerned about that position. I wasn't too concerned about it last year. It was just unfortunate that our front was not maybe dominant like we thought it could be. And at the same time, the scheme was a little bit different last year. We had to change it up last year coming into the season, which I don't think helped those guys. Continuing with the defense side of the ball, Aaron Glenn said that with Amani, we know his strengths and weaknesses. He may give up a few catches, but his confidence right now, his confidence is so high that he's like, the way that I look at Amani is, yeah, you can keep testing him, but at some point, he's going to take one. He's going to pick it off, right? He may give up a few receptions. We know his strengths. We know his weaknesses. But eventually, he's going to pick it off. And that's kind of the confidence that he's been playing with. He said the same thing with Charles Harris, playing on a tilt right now. Charles Harris is getting after it. Brought his football, career back to life. It was like resurrected him. You saw what he was, a first-round pick, and he couldn't find a landing spot with Miami or Atlanta. Bring him in, and it's just like, bam, here's your opportunity. Let me go get all these pressures, 7.5 sacks. Let me be good against the run. To the practice, Dan Campbell said that one thing he wanted to get started earlier this offseason is that he wanted to have more, situational football, a little more pressure football, where you're kind of in those situations. For example, in today's practice, they did a period where you had the ball at your own 40-yard line, 45 seconds on the clock, one timeout, offense versus defense. You want to get that started earlier. And last season, I would say, we got beat at times for sure early in the year in situations like that all the time. A lot of the time, actually. Baltimore is a great example where one player is not on the same page as everybody else. He leaves his guy. Everybody's playing, man, he leaves his guy. It's a wide open first down on a 4th and 20, something like that. And it basically beat us in that game. Talk about the Minnesota game. You could argue the San Fran game, week 1 offensively. The good thing is that those players that were involved in that, the Jerry Jacobs, those guys, they've now gotten those reps, so they should feel much more comfortable in those situations, and they seem to improve as the season went on. But he wants to get that going earlier. I think that's definitely huge for some of these young guys, but just understanding the situation. I think it's even beyond just, the play call, but understanding the situation, how much time is on the clock, getting up in a no-huddle situation, communicating calls very quickly. We talk about the offense, definitely check it out, how the offensive scheme may look and how that may affect some of the play calling. But defensively, the same thing, relaying calls, getting into things quickly, making sure everybody's on the same page without having to use a timeout. That way you can react to those things and play sound defense. And today they did that with all 3 quarterbacks. The first drive, it was the first team offense, but we know not everybody was there. So Matt Nelson was at right tackle. They had Penei Sewell at left tackle. One thing to mention, keep in mind all the rookies, undrafted free agents, as Dan Campbell says, they have to work their way up from the bottom. They all start at the bottom. So these guys aren't going to come in and it's like, oh, Malcolm Rodriguez is a starter. It won't happen. He could eventually be there. I think there's a very legitimate shot that that's the case, but it won't be it won't be in OTAs, right? He's got to work his way up from that and eventually work his way in to that kind of role. So they have Matt Nelson at right tackle and they had Sewell at left tackle like they did last season. First 1-minute drill with Goff leading the first team offense. Completion deep over the middle to DJ Chark as DJ Chark beat Will Harris. As we said, he was working as a 2 corner. Put the Detroit Lions in field goal range. Next couple of passes fell incomplete. We've read the first one went to Josh Reynolds on a post, kind of went through his hands a little bit high there. A pass broken up by Will Harris to Josh Reynolds. Lined up for about a 50-ish yard field goal, which was missed by Austin Stibert. Then they moved it up to make it a 43-yard field goal, which he made that kick. The second drive lasted literally 1 play. As Tim Boyle was the quarterback, he threw a pick 6 to Mike Hughes, who basically jumped a slant route, I guess, on Khalif Raymond and took it to the house. It's another cornerback just to add to a deep cornerback room. Picks it off, takes it back to the house. I'm sure that's that's got to be great early. Early in these things to kind of make a play like that, just to build your confidence up with the staff, but also in yourself to get a pick 6 that early. Blau apparently went pretty well early. They had a reception to Greg Bell, who ran a wheel route out of the backfield. That's the undrafted running back out of San Diego State. He had a completion between Iffy, who was playing at safety. So keep in mind, this was with the third team. He's playing safety from what we're told. He's with the third team playing safety. So I think it's just cross-training, just some extra work there. And then they had Boswell at cornerback, the cornerback out of Miami of Ohio, to Corey Sutton, who had a nice full extension grab. Corey Sutton's going to be fun to keep an eye on because he's not the fastest wide receiver, but he's a big playmaker, makes a lot of things happen once the ball's in his hands. He has a natural knack for making things happen once the ball's in his hands, creating big plays that way, but at the same time, he's got some agility in terms of cuts, which can allow him to run a pretty dynamic route tree. And what we're told is where Aiden Hutchinson took off. Apparently, Aiden Hutchinson wasn't with the starters. It was Charles Harris, Jayshon Cornell, Lee McNeil, Levi, and Julian Okwara, like we said, playing that Sam role with Alex, Derek Barnes, Okudah, Will, Amani, Tracy Walker, Deshaun Elliott. So he was probably, again, working from the bottom up. They make them all do that. And Aiden Hutchinson apparently went crazy. For the next 3 plays, remember, there's no really contact. There's not much contact. I'm not wearing pads. But apparently he would have had 3 straight sacks, beating the undrafted free agent out of Ferris State, Obed. I still don't know how to say this guy's name. The guard. They lined up Aiden Hutchinson in a package where it sounds like he was playing as a stand-up rusher. It was a sub package, so they lined him up inside. And this is where Aaron Glenn said, yeah, you want to, showcase his strengths, his ability to do this. Aiden Hutchinson could be really good here. Same thing with Pascal. Definitely go check out that video. But Aiden Hutchinson was really good here at Michigan. That flexibility to just put him everywhere on the line and let him go crazy. That's what he can do. And he just threatens you from everywhere. And apparently he beat the guard 3 3 straight times. So I'm just picturing it in my head. That's very unfortunate for a guard to be beat 3 straight. You tell me 3 straight times? That's unfortunate. But it also does speak to Aiden Hutchinson. Glenn said this on Aiden Hutchinson. He said, everything we thought we'd get, we've gotten so far, not only on the field, but also in the meeting room asking questions. But he said, man, Aiden Hutchinson, he was telling one of his coaches this, he's got that quickness, the ability to bend, turn, and continue to work, continue to use his hands, right? It's not one of those things where he bends the edge and turns the edge and his hand stops. Where I thought he gave Ohio State some problems, because he does keep working on the edge. He has very active hands, keeps working. He won a lot like this. He won a lot because we talk about how agile he is. He's extremely agile working the edge, but he was able to beat offensive tackles outside, inside, inside, outside because of how active his hands were when attacking the edge. And this is what made him so good at Michigan. He's always working. Honestly, not a huge surprise. And it's also like Dan Campbell said, like, we're pleased with the guy's strength because Aiden Hutchinson is extremely powerful. We saw it in college. He was just dominant against the run, dominating tight ends. But he's also still got so much room to grow. You look at his frame, how he is built. He could add so much more power. It's actually kind of scary to think about the upside, right? I mean, he's not a finished product. He missed most of 2020. He played a different role in 2019. He's not a finished product. However, he is very powerful already coming out of college. And a couple extra notes they threw in there is that Jayshon Cornell had a couple of passes batted down at line of scrimmage. He was working with the first team on the interior defensive line. As we said, there was no Brockers. No, Pascal's going to be working his way up. Hutchinson's working his way up. So all these young guys are working their way up. As Charles Harris was kind of playing the wider, weak side defensive end role from what it sounds like. And Julian Okoro was playing the sandbacker, kind of behind or to the side of Levi with Aleem McNeil and Jayshon holding it down in the inside. Hey, look, Jayshon, man, he's built for a scheme like this. Coming out of Ohio State, that 4-3, his ability to get into your pass rush. We just need to see him on the field. It's either been injuries, a suspension last year. Have not seen the guy on the field. So we'll see. Again, this doesn't mean he's going to be a starter. I highly doubt that. But it is a good note for him, especially early. And like we said, Pittman apparently stood out a little bit. Wouldn't get too caught up in what their labels are. Like, oh, Levi might be playing DN now. Like, no, just worry about what they're good at and where they're successful. Levi's going to be successful inside of an offensive tackle, specifically probably against guards, getting downhill, right? That's where he's going to be successful. So that's where the line's going to have him. And again, these rookies, the guys that we expect to come in and start, the Hutchinsons, there is no Romeo. So the defensive line sets, things like that are looking different right now in terms of the starting unit, right? Things are going to look much different. But just focus on what they're good at, right? Charles Harris, I'm not bumping him inside. He's going to be playing more of a wide role for me, probably on the weak side, playing a wider role for me. But the flexibility there, because Josh Paschal, whatever people are going to start listing him as, Paschal can play literally everywhere on the D line. Definitely go check out my video to see where I think he'd be better suited, but he can play everywhere on the defensive line. So I wouldn't get too caught up right now in kind of the labels that are put on the positions that they're playing, unless it's something different like Iffy, but just keep an eye on maybe what they're good at and where they'll probably be utilized based on that, because that's what Aaron Glenn says. He wants to put them in the position to be successful. It's why we did what we did last year, and it's why we're changing it to what we're changing it to this year, and I'm all for it. Notes that we have from organized team activities. Shout out to Pride of Detroit for this. Shout out to the DetroitLions.com for this. Shout out to Aaron Glenn for his interview and Dan Campbell. Me and Rad talked about some of this live. We reacted to Dan Campbell's presser, so if you have not seen that, make sure you go check it out. And yeah, I mean, we'll keep this thing updated. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm